Hey, welcome back to The Average Kitchen. Today we're gonna do a beautiful beef bourguignon. French dish, so good, especially in the fall, winter time in Canada where you like that hearty, warm meal. I'm gonna show you how to make it. So I've got roughly 2 pounds of beef here that I've already cut up. So I'm gonna add 3 tablespoons of flour to that. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna sort of shake and bake, for lack of better terms, our flour all over our beef, and then we're gonna get that on the stove and heat it up and start to brown our meat. You'll also see here I've got a very generous amount of creme and mushrooms, some garlic, butter, thyme, parsley, bay leaves, beautiful shallots, and a good amount of carrots with some beef broth. And then we're gonna, of course, use our Emu Australian medium dry port wine. Some people just use like a red wine, but I've always done it with a port. Yeah, it's gonna be beautiful. This is usually the part where Jamie works in that shake weight from however many years ago that was. So you'll see your beef will wanna stick together a little bit. That's why I left all the air in the bag, was to give the room for the beef to sort of get mixed up. I think I'm gonna add 1 more tablespoon of flour. Now what you'll find is this flour will obviously help coat our beef, but will also eventually help thicken our sauce or our gravy that we're gonna be making with this beautiful dish. So I'll get this going here. I don't know if you could sort of check out here, Jamie. Beef is very, very well, relatively evenly coated. So let's head over to the stove and let's get this cooking. Okay, so I'm gonna throw in a couple tablespoons of avocado oil. I like cooking with avocado oil because it's got a really high smoke point, so you can really get it ripping hot, which I like. So we'll just do roughly 2 tablespoons. We'll give that a second, maybe a little splash more. We'll give that a second to start to warm up here. So what we're gonna do, and you've probably heard this in cooking shows before, but basically we're wanting to get our beef cooked, we're gonna remove it, and then we're gonna deglaze our pan with our cooking wine. So that's getting nice and hot, so we'll start putting these in. Now you will see that they'll tend to wanna stick together a little bit on the, from the flour, but just do your best to sort of pull them apart. Once they start cooking, they'll come apart anyway, but we want to, in a perfect world, we want to try to brown all the sides of the meat. You'll see I took out a wooden spatula, which I find very helpful to help scrape the bottom of that pan whenever we go and deglaze it, and also helps flip around these chunks of beef. All right, I'll get the last couple pieces in and give my hands a quick wash, and then we'll get to cooking those. All right, so we're gonna mix this up the best we can. We may have to add a little bit more oil just to avoid any kind of sticking here. I think I will. And you'll see that eventually we should start to get some nice brown color on our meat. And you'll see that there's gonna be some stuff on the bottom here that's gonna stick. And that again is what we're gonna be deglazing once we put our port wine in.
A few minutes later.
All right, so I'm gonna turn that down a little bit. And I'm just gonna take some time to scoop out my beef. Not quite as dark brown as I would have liked, but that's okay. And you'll see obviously that leaves behind some of the flour residue and as well as some of the beef fat from starting to cook this beef. And that's good because that's what's gonna develop our flavor here on our beef bourguignon. So I may just try to give that a bit of a scrape, just to try to loosen up a little bit of the stuff. Should have an oven mitt on. Okay, so I turn the heat down because I don't want it to be too hot. And we're gonna slowly pour in our 2 cups. Sorry, 1.5 cups. And then we're gonna end up doing 2 cups of beef broth. Let that start to warm up. And essentially you're gonna end up cooking off the alcohol that's within that. That's only, well, it's 17.5% actually. It's pretty strong, so it's stronger than a normal wine. So you'll cook off the alcohol. Now, Jamie, you can probably smell that right now. I certainly can. And at the same time, we're sort of just scraping some of these little bits off here, which is gonna give us so much flavor in our dish. So I'm gonna work in now my 2 cups of beef broth, as well as 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 pretty heaping tablespoons of butter. And we're gonna throw in our garlic. So we got 2 big tablespoons of minced garlic, or probably 4 cloves of fresh garlic if you have it available to you. So we'll give that a little mix. We'll give that some time to start to heat up again. Now I can already tell, I forgot how big this pot is sometimes. I can already tell I'll probably end up adding more broth. You can never go wrong with having too much broth, in my opinion. So we'll give that a second to warm up. And we're gonna throw in 2 bay leaves and our thyme and our parsley. And then we're gonna put our beef back in, including whatever juice is sitting there, which is totally fine. We'll get that in there. And as well, I can grab my carrots. We'll get those in as well. So the thing about beef bourguignon is it's a slow cook that you're gonna wanna do probably for 3 to 4 hours on low heat. So I can already tell that I'm starting to lose a little bit of space. I've got a good amount of mushrooms that I wanna add. So I'm probably just gonna add 1 cup of beef broth. But let's head over to the island. We'll cut up some mushroom and we'll do up some shallots as well. And I'll throw in the meantime, I'll throw in a cup of beef broth. So in a perfect world, I'd love to have beautiful little pearl onions. Weren't available, so I went with these shallots. So I don't have a whole lot of experience with shallots, to be honest with you, because I generally don't see them much around here, but they're pretty nice looking little onions. Obviously a little bit more delicate than your standard onion, but we'll give these a peel, and I think I'll still leave them kind of bulkier like I would if they were pearl onions. So I think what I'll do is I'm just gonna leave them in these kind of longer pieces like that, and they'll go in there like that. So let me get through these onions and I'll be back with you and we'll talk about some mushrooms. So we're gonna dust some mushrooms. I've mentioned this in many, many videos before. I never wash mushrooms, I just dust them. I don't want the mushrooms to soak up all that water and moisture from the water itself. So I just dust them, clean them off. Now in this application, I always just sort of lop off part of that end there. And I'm gonna cut these quite chunky because this is a low and slow cook. If you cut your mushrooms super thin, by the time your meal is done, you won't even find your mushrooms anymore. So they're nice and bulky. So that's what we're gonna do across the board here is cut these quite chunky. One technique you can use as well is to wait until maybe the last hour before you add your mushrooms so that they don't sort of dissolve. But in this case here, we're gonna cook these nice and slow, so we'll cut them quite chunky. So I'll just get through these mushrooms and give them a clean. All right, so we got our shallots done as well as our mushrooms. Again, I talked about they're nice and chunky. They're gonna hold up well to the heat of that broth. So we're gonna go over to the stove. I'm gonna add some salt and pepper. We're gonna get these in there and then we're gonna give it a couple hours to simmer, tasting along the way for salt and pepper to see what your desired taste is and what you like. This is definitely best served over beautiful, milky mashed potatoes. So I highly recommend this over mashed potatoes, and you'll definitely love the complexity of the gravy and the taste of this dish. So I'm gonna head over to the stove and let's get these into the mixture. So you can see I've got a light simmer going here. So we're just gonna give that a quick mix. I should mention as well, before I forget, the 2 bay leaves that we put in there, you can see one of them's right there. You're definitely gonna wanna remove that before you serve this to your family or to your guests. There was this like old wives' tale or this misconception that if you ate a bay leaf that it would kill you. I actually looked it up. It's not true. However, they say that if you tried to chew it, because it's so coarse and so difficult to chew, it could definitely create you some issues. But I don't think that there's a toxicity level in the bay leaf itself that is fatal. So we'll get those in there. So I'm glad I added that extra cup of beef broth to just bring our level up a little bit. Obviously, as these mushrooms start to cook down, they're gonna take less room in our pot. I'm gonna grab my salt and pepper here, and we'll give this a pretty liberal amount of pepper, bit of a pinch of salt, and then again, we'll come back in an hour or so, and we'll try it again and see how our flavor profile is developing.
1 hour later.
All right, so we're an hour in here. Let's have a look. I had thrown the lid on. Our mushrooms are starting to slowly break down. And you can see, obviously, there's still a good consistent size. So I can see that the broth is a little on the thin side. That's okay. We're gonna cook this for probably about another 2 to 3 hours. And if the sauce is still thin, then I'll make a slurry. And if you don't know what a slurry is, it's basically equal parts cornstarch, equal parts cold water. So 2 tablespoons cornstarch, 2 tablespoons cold water, mix it in a bowl, pour it in, and it will thicken your sauce. So if you have a thin sauce, try that, it'll work. So I'm gonna give this a try. It's definitely one of those meals that the flavors start to develop over time. Yeah, so it's so nice. If you've never had this before, it's a really rich, full, flavorful, beautiful meal. I'm gonna give it another couple hours, and if it needs a slurry, I'll add that. But that's our episode. I'm gonna serve this over mashed potatoes. Can't wait to eat it. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you on the next one.